I'm interested in your views on what's happening in Australia. You wrote recently about Sweden, their left-wing government having mass migration and having all sorts of unintended consequences, going from this peaceful paradise to a country now. I think Sweden's the second most bombed country that is not at war. They've got bombs going off all over the place. And we've got a left-wing government in now. We've just had more than 500,000 net migrants come in a year. It's an incredible surge to previous years. What do we need to be mindful of, and what lessons are there from Sweden, which really had an open border policy different to what we've seen in Australia?
Yes, no, it's amazing, Rita. I mean, as you say, this is in 2015, the Swedes opened their borders. They said it's incredibly important to be open-hearted and generous to the world and so on. But what they did was, as we just heard in the previous segment, they did what a lot of governments have been doing. You effectively punish people who come to our countries legally. You punish them and you incentivize people who break the rules and come illegally. And that's happening everywhere from Sweden to America to Britain and Australia. It's an astonishing mistake. But yes, I mean, as Rita says, you have this crazy situation. Like Sweden, do you remember the old days? We all used to talk about Sweden, always a Scandinavian option for everything. Anything in life could be improved by referring to Scandinavia. People would say, oh, well, the Swedish this, the Danish that, whether it was a hot drink or a way to feel good or a policy. It was always about Scandinavia. And then, as you say, Rita, you get this situation where you have now Sweden, the second largest number of bombings of any country not officially at war, only after Mexico. Only after Mexico. And if I'd have said to you 10 years ago, what do you think about when you think about Sweden? Like me, you'd have probably said, well, I don't know, hot drinks, overpriced food, but nice people, or rather cold. You wouldn't have said, oh, grenade attacks. The traditional Swedish grenade attack. Never forget the intrinsic importance to our culture of grenades. But that's the case because they just didn't care about who they let in. And it meant that they were letting in military-aged males who very often lied about their age. And, none of this, there are legitimate asylum seekers in the world. Those people are completely stripped of their capabilities and their rights. When you allow, as I've seen this in Sweden myself, big bearded guys in their 20s who say, oh, I'm a child migrant, allowed into a school and so on, and they just lose control of everything. But, that's the thing with the migration issue. All of our countries in the developed world are struggling with this. There are millions upon millions of people in the world who want to come to relatively safe, liberal, democratic countries like this one, like Britain, like America, and like European countries. And the question is, are we able to step up to that challenge and actually bring in people at a reasonable rate, or is that too difficult for our politicians?
Great question. James.
Well, Douglas, I want to pick up on that theme here because it seems like a whole big part of the problem here is that in the West, in countries, whether it's Sweden or Scandinavia or England or America or Australia, there's a real problem now, about talking about the values that we have as either individual nations or as, a broader society. And it's like we've lost any sort of ability. We're now squeamish about talking about that. In Australia, you can only talk about the immigration issue in the context of housing and the economy. If you get out of that zone, it starts to be a third rail. Have we lost the ability? Is it too late for us now to get that back? Because it seems to me where this all goes, Douglas, is that you wind up being so liberal, so tolerant that you import an awful lot of people who don't necessarily come because they want to subscribe to these values, but maybe impose a different set of values. What happens then to the West? Is it too late? How do we get back this solid ground, which I think is ground that's not racist, but it is something that is to be proud of and to be cherished, because once we lose it, we don't get a liberal society back.
Well, that's right. I mean, we know, James, don't we? We know the values of this. We know the reason why people come to our countries. There is no movement the other way. I mean, I always say, when the boats were coming to Australia with illegals from other parts of this region, It wasn't like they met boats the other way of Aussies desperately trying to flee the oppressive, conservative or otherwise government in Australia. The movement is always one way. I mean, you don't even get people moving from Britain to France on the boats. It's always France to Britain. People want to move up through Europe. When people cross the Rio Grande, when these Mexican cartels and others take very, very beleaguered people who've given their life savings to horrible, horrible criminal gangs, you don't find a bunch of Texans saying they want to flee to the freedom of Ecuador. Now, my point on that is, therefore, we should have the courage to say, look, at the very least, we must be doing something right. There must be something we're doing right.
It's our pronouns, the use of our pronouns. That
yeah, I know. Yes. It's all of that for sure. I forgot I didn't check your pronouns beforehand, James, but I let me guess them. But it's a very strange thing, and as you said it before, we've got this situation where you can talk about it in economic terms, you can talk about it in housing terms, but the larger cultural terms are still a third rail. And I'm astonished that after all of these years, we've known the issues of immigration and integration for many years. I'm amazed that we're still in all of our countries at this very, very toddler stage of the debate. It shouldn't be that hard to say, look, if you want to come to Australia, you want to become part of Australia, you've got something to give to this country, and you will give to this country, and you want to be part of it, fantastic. Join the queue and let's see what we can do. But if it's the case that you want to come here and you don't really like the place, or you want to change the place, or you want to change the place back to the sort of place where the place you left from, and maybe some of the reasons why you left, then maybe that's not going to be a workable deal. I don't think that's so difficult.
It's not difficult. It's common sense to you, it's common sense to your fans, it's common sense to most people, but not to our political leaders. And why have we got in Britain, you had the House of Commons the other day actually intimidated, harassed to the point of changing the rules by Islamists.
Well, that was an amazing scene. Yes, I mean, effectively a mob outside of Parliament affected the workings of Parliament in Westminster. But, the really interesting thing on that is the politicians, even after that happened, couldn't identify who had been doing the threatening. They couldn't identify it. They talk about it, all of our politicians do that, they talk about these amorphous things like, we must stand against hate. Okay, and then what? And who? Get specific. Who were the group outside Parliament? Who was it projecting slogans onto Big Ben whilst the democracy is at work and our representatives are meant to be voting? Who is it that our representatives feel a threat from? And this can go wrong really fast if you don't identify it. I mean, our politicians should be frank. Are they feeling terrible threats and changes to their voting processes because of people from Wales? Or is it people who is it the people who live and work in Chinatown? Is that a place that members of Parliament shouldn't go? Let's be specific about it. And they cannot be. And even in Britain, and Rita and I have spoken about this before, even in Britain, when another of our MPs was murdered a couple of years ago by a jihadist, even then, his colleagues couldn't identify the ideology that had killed their colleague. They talked about him as if he died of natural causes. And I think they do a great dishonour not just to their murdered colleague and to themselves, but to the public when they can't be open and honest about that. I think broadly speaking, a lot of our politicians treat us like we are incredibly febrile, easily riled up, dangerous mobs. They don't trust the public. And I don't know, this is your country. I'm a mere visitor, but it seems to me that the average Australian is a level-headed and decent sort of person. Same thing with the British public, same thing with the American public. We're not deplorables. We're not easily riled, violent gangs. We're the public. And they treat us with this incredible disdain and suspicion and indeed fear. And that's one of the things that causes them to be, sort of timid, don't say anything, can't tell the truth. Never
So what do
know
we do?
someone-
How do we combat it? Vote the lot of them out. Start again. I don't know.
I never like to interfere in any country's politics. I always just say, you know...
Donald Trump has this week. He's interfered now. He's made some comments.
Yeah,
so you can as well. You can as well.
Yeah, there are all sorts of problems with following that precedent. I would say precedent, not president. But look, I always just say, vote wisely and carefully,
Exactly.
because wow, does it have repercussions.
100%. Douglas Murray, always great to chat to you. This evening you'll be at the Enmore and your tour of Australia. Fantastic, uncomfortable conversations. Absolutely brilliant. Great to see you
So
again
good to
here
see
on
you.
Outsiders, Douglas.
Thank you.